Hey there, viewers. When a bodyguard speaks out, it usually means they've seen more than they were ever supposed to. That's exactly what this story is about, as one of Diddy's former protectors exposed the truth about the underground tunnels. The details were so alarming the judge immediately called for a full investigation. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Man Who Wouldn't Blink. I've been in courtrooms long enough to know when something's off. Not like someone shouting or a brawl breaking out or anything flashy like that. I mean the real kind of off, the kind where everyone's too quiet, where the air feels still like a waiting room outside bad news, where you stop typing for a second and realize your own breathing's the loudest thing in the room. That kind of off. I'm just a stenographer. I don't wear robes, I don't slam gavels, and I sure as hell don't make decisions. I sit in the corner with my fingers flying over keys, eyes flicking between mouths and sound. I'm trained not to think about the people I'm transcribing. I'm supposed to be a machine. Words in, words out. But that morning, I couldn't help it. Something about him, about Combs, wouldn't let my eyes wander too far. They brought him in earlier than scheduled. I clocked it when the deputy flinched at the double doors opening too soon. Nobody said a word. He just walked in, flanked on both sides, dressed sharp but somehow not present. You know how most folks, when they walk into a courtroom, they either hunch like they're guilty or puff up like they're not? Not him. He just glided in, like he'd already been here in his mind 100 times. He sat. Didn't look around, didn't blink. That's what got me. It wasn't the chains or the expression. It was his eyes. Open, fixed, straight ahead. Not on the judge, not on anyone in particular, just open. Still, like they'd been painted on, and the longer I looked, the more I realized he wasn't blinking. I've seen all kinds. Hardened lifers, broken junkies, crooked officials, but no one sits that still, not unless they're trying to scare someone, or unless they're already somewhere else mentally, like their body showed up but their mind stayed behind. Anyway, the bail hearing started off the usual way. Prosecution laid out risk factors, defense countered with community ties. It was all expected, routine. I tapped away, keeping up, half listening, half functioning. But then, something shifted. A young woman from the clerk's desk got up, clutching a red file folder like it had teeth. She walked it to the bench, handed it over, and whispered something in the judge's ear. The judge, an older woman I've typed for 12 times before, flipped it open. I noticed her lips tighten, then purse. She closed it again, like it stank, then reopened it slower. That was the first sign. Whatever was in that folder wasn't part of the original docket. That much was clear. And when the judge asked both counsels to approach, even the attorneys seemed caught off guard. They leaned in, whispered. The courtroom held its breath. No one dared cough, shift, sneeze. That silence, man, it was thick. Like everyone suddenly realized they were on the edge of something they didn't understand. I glanced at Combs again, still not blinking. The attorneys returned to their tables, faces unreadable. The judge leaned toward her mic. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, like glass cutting into velvet. This court has received a sealed affidavit signed by a former security contractor employed by the defendant. She paused. The contents of the affidavit, while not yet verified, raise serious concerns regarding the safety of potential witnesses and the obstruction of justice. People in the gallery started murmuring then. Reporters shifted. One guy dropped his notepad. A woman clutched her necklace tight enough to make her knuckles white. I typed it all, word for word, even the silence. The judge continued. "Is there any truth to this claim?" she said, slow, steady, deliberate. "That beneath his residence exists a network of restricted access tunnels designed for illicit transport of individuals and goods?" That did it. The room froze. The air turned to glass. I swear even the walls were listening. Combs didn't move. Not a twitch, not a breath, just those eyes. I stopped typing for a second. It was like the world tipped sideways and all the things we thought were too ridiculous to believe suddenly felt possible. Underground tunnels? What kind of tunnels? And what the hell does transport of individuals mean? The judge didn't elaborate. She just stared at Combs for a long moment, as if she was trying to decide whether she was looking at a man or something else entirely. I couldn't read her face, but I saw her fingers curl tight against the edge of the bench, like she was holding herself back from saying more. His lawyer asked for time to review the document. The prosecution requested immediate denial of bail, citing risk of flight and potential leverage over witnesses. I was typing, but my hands were moving on their own now. My brain had checked out. All I could do was watch him. Still not blinking. I'd been watching for at least 10 minutes, not once. There was a sound metallic soft. I looked up. One of the court officers had loosened his grip on his sidearm without even noticing, just touching the grip like it was a reflex. The judge looked down at the folder again, tapped it once, then sat back in her chair, like she'd just made peace with something she didn't want to say. "This court denies the defendant's bail request," she said, her voice steady but low. "Furthermore, this court orders a sealed evidentiary probe into the contents of the submitted affidavit, to be carried out under judicial supervision." And that was that. Gavel didn't slam, no shouting, no objections. Just a cold, dense silence. And a man who still hadn't blinked. As they cuffed him again and turned him toward the side door, I swear, for a fraction of a second, he smiled. Not wide, just a twitch. A knowing kind of curl in the corner of his mouth, like he'd heard the verdict 1,000 years ago and was just watching the rest of us catch up. I didn't sleep that night, not from the tunnels, not even from the affidavit, which I never got to read. It was the eyes, those damn eyes, wide open like windows with no curtains, like they'd seen everything and didn't need to see anything ever again. They never did get him to blink. Chapter 2. The detail no one questioned. I still remember the first night I saw the hatch, not when I opened it, just the first time I saw it. That was enough. It was about 2 years before everything started falling apart. Back then, I was still working as the primary security lead for him. No one used his name around the estate, not unless he said it first. We just called him the King. That was how the newer staff were trained. Don't ask questions, follow the hours, respect the King. Seemed dumb at first, but after your first midnight zone shift, it didn't feel like a joke anymore. See, there were 2 kinds of days at that place, normal ones and midnight zones. You'd know by the color of the wristbands the guests got when they came through the main gates. If it was silver, it was a party. Gold, that meant the house was on lockdown. Midnight zone. No staff upstairs except kitchen and 2 bodyguards. Everyone else rotated down to the outer perimeter or off-site. No cameras, no phones, every reflection covered, every mirror turned around. Lights dimmed red, like the whole house was holding its breath. I didn't question it. Not at first. When you're brought into that world, you learn quick what curiosity costs. But after a while, the patterns stuck out. The guests, mostly young, always beautiful, most of them nervous when they came in, were told it was part of the experience, like immersive theater but without an audience. I'd escort them from the back driveway to the pool house. They'd be blindfolded before stepping inside, told to trust the path. Some smiled, some didn't. Most were high on something already, so they just floated. The pool house had this weird smell, chlorine, old perfume, something earthy underneath. I used to think it was mildew until I noticed the vents near the floor weren't real, just hollow metal with foam behind them, and the rug, that massive Persian one, was always slightly off-center, like someone kept dragging it just a few inches to the right, then forgetting to fix it. One night I got tired of stepping over it and pulled it straight. That's when I saw it, a corner of steel underneath, brushed metal, a small hinge, and a fingerprint pad the size of a quarter. I didn't touch it. Not then. See, in our orientation, what they called the walk, we were told there were zones of non-concern. Places in the estate we were neither assigned nor responsible for. If something happened in one of those zones, we weren't to intervene. The wording was exact. Intervention leads to termination. And no one wanted to get cut off, not from the money, not from the perks, not from the silence. Because that's what you got used to more than anything. How quiet it was under all the noise, like the whole estate was sitting on top of something that hummed. But that hatch bothered me. More and more. I asked an older guy on the team once how long it had been there. He just looked at me and said, "Longer than the house." Then he walked off, never spoke to me again after that. There were nights I'd walk past it on my own rounds and feel this pressure. Not like paranoia, more like gravity, like something was down there and it was awake. I started clocking details. The blackout nights were always around the new moon. The pool lights would stay off. There'd be a specific scent in the air, burnt jasmine and vinyl, weird mix. And sometimes, just before the guests arrived, music would start playing through the stone speakers by the garden, but not the usual stuff. No lyrics, no rhythm, just tone, deep and constant, like sonar from a ship that was never meant to surface. I didn't break protocol for months, but then came the girl. I don't remember her name. I wish I did. She was maybe 20, wore a pink faux fur coat and carried her heels instead of wearing them. Her eyes were wide, not party-wide but memory-wide, like she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to, and it never really left her. I was walking her down to the pool house when she leaned in and whispered, "I think I've been here before, but I was younger then." I stopped cold. My first instinct was to ask her what she meant, but I didn't. I just walked slower. When I handed her off, she looked back over her shoulder, just for a second, like she was hoping I'd stop her, but I didn't. That's what kills me. I didn't. That night, after everyone had left and the cleaners came through, I went back to the pool house. No cameras meant no record. I lifted the rug, opened the hatch, and stared down. It wasn't stairs, not at first. It was a slide, narrow, rubber-lined, sloping into blackness. I didn't go in. I just sat there, staring into the dark, listening. The air was cold, not cool, cold, like basement freezer cold, but dry, too dry. Eventually, I noticed the hatch had a second panel beside the fingerprint reader. I hadn't seen it before. It glowed faint green, and on it, just one word, authorized. I wasn't it. A week later, one of the newer guards got fired without warning. His name was Alan, young guy, quiet. The story was he breached a zone he wasn't cleared for. That's all they said, just breached, no details. His severance was delivered in cash. He signed an NDA and vanished. No socials, no forwarding address. After that, the hatch was sealed, new lock installed, the rug replaced. But the routines didn't change. Midnight zones kept happening, guests kept showing up and disappearing again, and the staff kept pretending there wasn't something moving beneath our feet. I kept working, kept my mouth shut, kept my badge clean. But I started writing things down, just in case. What time the tunnel lights switched on, which cars left without passengers, the names that weren't on guest lists but still got wristbands, the patterns, the smells, the music, the dreams. Because that's the part I haven't told anyone, not even the feds. After I saw the hatch, I started dreaming of water, not the ocean. Stagnant water, cold, under pressure, and stairs spiraling downward, made of bone, always leading to a locked door, and always just before I woke up, I'd hear the same voice. It's not what's under the house, it's what the house was built to contain. I don't know what they were doing in those tunnels. I just know I was supposed to never find out. And when I did, I understood something nobody says out loud. He didn't build the empire to entertain people. He built it to hide something. Chapter 3. The map wasn't drawn, it was remembered. They told me it would be a simple job. Audio installation, high-end estate, tight schedule. Nothing I hadn't done before. The guy who brought me on didn't work for a company. No logo, no badge, just called himself Nash. Said they needed someone off books, someone who knew how to shut up and wire fast. At first, I didn't ask questions. You don't in my line of work, especially when the paycheck clears up front and the address is in Beverly Hills. But something felt off the minute I got to the estate. The house was beautiful on the outside, clean, modern, like it belonged in a magazine spread. But behind the polish, I could feel it, like the walls were holding their breath. You know that feeling when a room is too quiet? This was that times 10, like the silence was alive. I was told I'd be working on the lower-level audio suite. When I asked for schematics or room plans, Nash just laughed, said, "There's no blueprint for where you're going." Thought he was joking. He wasn't. He handed me a dolly stacked with subwoofers and a long coil of speaker wire and said, "Follow me." We entered through a small service hallway near the kitchen, hidden behind what looked like a built-in wine cabinet. He tapped a sequence on a panel and the whole wall slid open. Just like that. I remember the air changed the moment we stepped in. Colder, dry as bone, and the lights, they weren't white, they were red, dim, pulsing like the inside of a vein. The stairs went down for what felt like forever. 4 stories minimum, but the dimensions didn't make sense. I knew the depth, I counted the turns, but when we stopped, it felt like we were deeper than the basement of any residential structure had a right to be. I said something like, "You sure we're not under the street?" And Nash just grinned, said, "Street's not what's above us." The walls weren't drywall, not even cinder block. They were poured concrete, matte black, with seams that didn't line up like normal construction. Seamless in places, like molded infrastructure. I tapped the wall once, just out of habit, testing acoustics. No echo. Not low, not muted. It was like the sound got swallowed the second it left my hand. Like the air didn't want noise. Nash didn't say much after that, just led me down a narrow corridor to what he called Zone 6 and told me to start setting up the speakers. The room was hexagonal, no doors, just a slit in the wall we'd come through that sealed shut behind us without a sound. I didn't see a switch or a hinge or even a handle. Once it was shut, it was like the wall had never opened. I asked him how we'd get out. He didn't answer. So I worked, ran wires, mounted speakers to the strange indentations on the walls, all while trying to ignore the faint vibrations under my feet. They weren't mechanical, more like a hum, a low throb that seemed to match my pulse if I stayed still long enough. After an hour, I started getting a headache. After 2, my nose started bleeding. Nash handed me a napkin, said it happened to the last guy too. Adjustment period, he called it. There were other rooms. One was lined entirely in mirror ceiling, floor, all of it, but the reflections were wrong. I'd raise my hand and see the delay, just a half second, but enough to make your stomach turn. Like watching yourself glitch. Another room had no corners. Perfect curve, wall into ceiling into floor, seamless and smooth. It smelled like burnt plastic and cinnamon. I remember thinking it was like the inside of a speaker cone. The acoustics there were wild. Stand in the center and whisper, and the sound would come back to you 5 times louder from behind. I tested it once. Said my name. The reply came back in a different voice. That's when I told Nash I was done. He just nodded. No threats, no argument. Said the job was over anyway. I left that night and never came back. But the dreams didn't stop. Every night for weeks after, I'd see red lights in my sleep. Hear that humming? I'd wake up sweating, convinced I was still underground. My hands would twitch like I was still holding wire cutters. I stopped taking new jobs, grew paranoid, started locking all my windows, blacking out my mirrors, and then one night I sat down and started sketching. Not with measurements, just memory. It poured out of me, the angles, the curves, the rooms with no exits. I remembered how the air flowed against gravity, where the vibrations were strongest, where the heat came from. I drew every detail I could recall and labeled them the best I could. Mirror chamber, inverted echo room, blind hallway. When I was done, I mailed it anonymously to a non-profit legal team I'd read about online, the ones investigating trafficking claims linked to high-profile properties. I didn't sign it, just wrote, "I didn't know what I was building until it was too late." Years passed. I changed names, states, buried my old life, took up fake IDs and odd jobs far from cities. But 2 months ago, I got the call. Unmarked number. Man on the other end didn't introduce himself, just said, "We think your map's real, and we think it's incomplete." I asked how he found me. He said, "You didn't cover your tracks as well as you think, but that's not why we're calling. We want to know what was in Zone 7. I didn't know there was a Zone 7. He said, "You drew 6 rooms. The camera footage we recovered shows a 7th access point, but the walls collapse inward on themselves." I asked him what he meant. He said, "We think the room moves." And then he hung up. Since that call, I haven't slept more than 2 hours straight. I started hearing things again. Soft pulses behind walls, whispering static in speakers I haven't turned on. My mirrors feel hot to the touch. I cover them now, just in case. Because the truth is, I remember more than I ever wrote down, and something tells me the parts I forgot are the ones that mattered most. Chapter 4. We called them the Walkers. They never walked in the way they walked out. It's the first thing you need to understand. I worked the North Lawn event in 21. It was a last-minute booking stylist for the B-list guests mostly. My job was basic, touch-ups, wardrobe fixes, making sure no one passed out with lipstick smeared across their face. I'd done a dozen of these kinds of gigs for him before, but this one was different. Not louder or more chaotic, quieter, too. There were about 50 people there that night. Half of them showed up with drivers, the other half were already inside when I arrived. The music was low, the lighting all warm and amber, like we were inside a slow-burn candle. Nothing felt sharp, everything was softened. Deliberately, I think. The weirdest part was how guests arrived. Through the front gates, yes, but then they were guided, not walked, by handlers into the main house. They disappeared for hours. When they re-emerged, they weren't coming back through the doors. They came out of the greenhouse. A few at a time, barefoot sometimes, clothes different. A girl in a green latex dress who went in wearing jeans. A guy who didn't say a word, just stared ahead, eyes glossy. One girl was crying, but when someone asked what was wrong, she just whispered, "It was perfect." I asked another staffer, someone who worked lighting, if they'd noticed. They nodded, slow, like they were trying not to look like they were nodding at all. "We call them the Walkers," she said. I didn't get it at the time, but now I do. A second account, this one from a private chef. She prepped for an overnight party in early spring, all organic, Mediterranean theme per client request. She was told not to ask questions, just prepare food and leave it on the carts. But when she brought the first tray down to the wine cellar, she noticed the guest. Young, mid-20s, probably an actor. He was standing at the cellar entrance, swaying a little. Not drunk, just off. She said hello. He didn't respond, just smiled and walked inside. She waited for him to return. He didn't. Hours later, she was back upstairs cleaning up when she overheard a phone call. One of the handlers telling someone the guest had been located. Found in a vacant guest house 4 blocks away, curled up on the floor, shivering. No memory of how he got there, no signs of forced entry. The cellar door? still locked from the inside. The chef put in her notice that night. There are voice notes too, one from a girl who used to work the spa wing. She never left her name, just sent the audio in anonymously to a non-profit collecting survivor stories. Her voice shakes the entire time, like she's trying to talk through a fever. I thought it was a spa, you know. The room was warm, there were crystals, sound bowls, all that. They told us it was vibrational alignment, that it would help us feel grounded. I lay down on the table and they played this tone, like a hum, like 1,000 bees stuck in a glass jar. She says the lights turned red after 5 minutes. Then I heard water running beneath me, like under the floor, and the table started shaking, but no one else noticed. I tried to sit up and someone whispered in my ear, "It's already over." When I opened my eyes, I was outside, in the garden, on my knees. I don't remember standing. I don't remember walking. I was just there. She ends the message with a phrase that shows up again and again across different accounts. I never walked up, only ever out. Another woman submitted an email. No attachments, no signature. There were mirrors on one side of the hallway, but only on one side. You couldn't see yourself unless you looked sideways, and when you did, your reflection wasn't doing the same thing. I tried walking forward, but the reflection stayed still. Then it started moving backward. And that's when I turned and ran. A man, voice distorted in a recording, says he was hired as a sound tech for a therapy corridor. He describes the structure, narrow, curved, faint blue lights embedded in the ceiling. He was told the guests would walk barefoot, eyes closed, guided by subtle tones. He helped install the speakers. They told us the tone was designed to dislodge memory. That was the word, dislodge. He lasted 3 nights before quitting. One of the guests started screaming mid-walk, said the walls were breathing, but when he checked the footage later, she'd never opened her mouth. A nurse wrote to the same nonprofit. She never worked at the house itself, but claimed to have treated 2 different women who mentioned the tunnels. All had shallow scratches on her back, not from trauma, like she'd been crawling through something. Her hands were raw. Her eyes wouldn't stop darting. She asked if the mirror was double-sided. She said both women refused to enter elevators after that. One of them smashed her bathroom mirror 3 days after being discharged. All these stories scattered like puzzle pieces that don't quite fit. But the similarities are too loud to ignore. Red lights. No memory of going upstairs. A different exit every time. The ones who re-emerge aren't the same as the ones who entered. Something changes. It's not just trauma, it's disruption. Memory scrambled like static. Spatial awareness bent. They remember sensations but not timelines. Doors that didn't exist on the way in. Reflections that moved first. Music that followed them out. And most of them, they only talk once, then they vanish. The chapter ends with an email, sent anonymously to an internal FBI address. You're looking in the wrong place. Don't just search his house. Look under the ones next to it. They connect. That's why no one runs. They disappear instead. The walkers aren't walking out of fear. They're walking because they don't know how to stop. Chapter 5. The Tunnel with No Walls. I've mapped earthquake zones in Syria and old missile silos in Nevada. I've documented flood tunnels under major cities and surveyed historical sites where the ground practically whispers when you walk across it. But I've never seen anything like what I found beneath that house. Not even close. They flew me out under a closed contract. The request came directly from the court after the bail denial and sealed testimony. I was told to approach the property as a forensic audit, not a criminal investigation. Strictly architectural. My job was to survey the land for structural anomalies, document any voids, and determine if any non-permitted expansions had been made below grade. But we both knew that was just the official language. What they really wanted was proof of something. The house itself looked normal, too normal. clean-cut, modernist edges, no visible wear. But the land beneath it? That was where things broke pattern fast. I started with ground-penetrating radar. Most high-end estates have basements or panic rooms that throw minor noise, but this was something else. The initial scans returned readings that didn't match the architectural layout. Beneath the east wing, about 40 feet down, there was a stretch of empty space, a long one, narrow, perfectly straight, but when I rescanned it from the southern edge, it wasn't there. Gone, like it had moved. Which of course shouldn't be possible. That's when I pulled out the LiDAR rig. We ran the beams twice. Both times it picked up the same anomaly, mobile void zones. Not just hollow spaces, but hollow systems. Modular, like someone had placed shipping containers beneath the house, but with no known entry points and no excavation trails in the soil above. The voids had seams that aligned with mechanical brackets. I've only seen construction like that once, on military bases. They call it dynamic containment design, meant for fast deployment and relocation of sensitive cargo, not for residential use, never for private estates. As we scanned deeper, we picked up thermal aberrations in one corridor, a line of heat that didn't track with plumbing or geothermal systems. We found a pocket that pulsed on our sensors, faint but steady. One of my team joked that it looked like a heartbeat. The joke didn't land. The most unsettling readings came from what we labeled Zone 4, near the Western Garden. We recorded a corridor approximately 80 feet long that absorbed signal. No reflection, no return, just silence, like the LiDAR beams were being swallowed. I've only encountered that once before, when mapping around heavy EM shielding, the kind you'd find in secure data centers or black site bunkers. That's when we detected the radiation. Not high levels, nothing that would trigger hazmat protocols, but elevated microwave energy, concentrated in a pattern that suggested active electronic shielding. We tried to trace the source, but the signal warped depending on where we stood. The data came back like it was bouncing off mirrors we couldn't see. At one point, my elite analyst turned to me and said, "It's like the space knows we're watching it." I laughed, but I didn't feel like laughing. I compiled the report over 3 sleepless nights. It included thermal maps, LiDAR overlays, and signal disruption patterns. I flagged 17 void anomalies, 8 of which appeared to move locations between scans. I submitted a redacted version to the local building authority. The unredacted version went straight to the court. My summary paragraph was short. It read, "Evidence suggests a network of underground corridors exhibiting characteristics of modular architecture and active shielding technology inconsistent with residential zoning. Additionally, void zones appear to possess mobility, suggesting rail-guided substructures capable of being relocated or concealed. This configuration is not standard, nor is it structurally logical for an escape system. It is optimized for containment and obfuscation." The final sentence I included in my internal memo, addressed to the judge, not the general filing. These aren't just escape tunnels. They're designed to hold people without leaving a record. And someone knew how to delete the blueprints. That part was true. I searched the Los Angeles County records for any construction permits related to subterranean work beneath the estate. Nothing. Not one. Even more concerning, the land survey from 2005 was altered. The record showed a clean sheet of bedrock under the property, flat, unbroken. But bedrock doesn't lie, and the scans showed cuts. Surgical, deliberate, not blast holes or erosion, channels, engineered. That meant someone went back into public record and cleaned it, covered their tracks, maybe years ago, maybe decades. The judge sent back a single-line reply. "Understood. Prepare for physical entry." That was 2 weeks ago. I haven't responded yet. Because here's the thing. After we pulled our gear and left the site, something happened. 3 of my team members reported memory distortion. That's not a phrase we throw around lightly. One said he couldn't remember packing up his equipment. Another said she drove home but had no recollection of the drive. One claimed he saw someone standing in the greenhouse as we were leaving, a man, tall, back turned, unmoving, but no one else saw him. I started hearing a hum again in my own home. Thought it was a fridge motor, disconnected the power. It kept going. Sometimes I wake up and the lights in my hallway are red. I tell myself it's just residual stress, that I'm projecting. But there's a moment, just before I fall asleep, where I see that corridor again, the one that absorbed light, that didn't echo, that watched us. And I wonder if something below that house wasn't just hidden. I wonder if it remembers. Chapter 6. The Hatch Beneath the Bed. January 3rd. It's hard to tell what day it is in this house. No clocks in the hallways, no windows in the servant quarters, just lights that dim and brighten on their own schedule, and people who act like time doesn't apply to them. I wake when the floor vibrates beneath my mattress, not from footsteps, from something beneath. I've worked in houses with secrets before. Hidden liquor rooms, panic rooms, love nests tucked behind bookshelves. But this place is different. The secrets here don't just stay hidden. They move. January 8th. 3 guests arrived last night. None logged, no names on the manifest. I checked twice. They came in after midnight through the back, escorted by 2 men I didn't recognize. Not security, no uniforms. Just blank faces, like they'd been told not to think too hard. The guests were all women, young, each dressed the same, white dress, no shoes. Their hair was wet, but it hadn't been raining. I watched from the service corridor as they were led into the main house. When I checked the hallway rugs this morning, their footprints were gone. Not cleaned, just gone. January 12th. Something is wrong with the second floor east corridor. I mop it every morning, always the same pattern, sweep, soap, rinse. But today, the tiles were sticky, almost like syrup. I thought maybe a spill, but there was no scent, no trace of sugar or alcohol, just this faint metallic tang, like pennies soaked in bleach. I got down on my hands and knees to scrub, and the rag came up pink, like diluted blood. When I came back 10 minutes later with bleach, the tiles were clean, perfect, like nothing had ever been there. January 13th. The chairs in the master lounge keep moving. I straighten them every night. Same angles, same spacing. It's part of the checklist. But the last few mornings, they're shifted, slightly off-center, always tilted inward, like they're facing something that... I asked Marta about it. She looked at me too long before answering. "Don't move them anymore," she said. "Just clean around." January 16th. I had to clean the master bedroom today. Normally, I'm not allowed in unless given explicit clearance, but the handler, Eli, I think his name is, was distracted on a call and the door was ajar. So I went in. It smelled like burnt cedar and jasmine, not sprayed, steeped. The whole room felt humid, like a greenhouse left sealed too long. As I was vacuuming, I noticed something strange. The rug by the bed wasn't sewn down. That rug has been the same since I started. Embroidered, antique, always fixed. But today the corner was curled up slightly, enough to show a metal frame beneath it. Curiosity got the better of me. I pulled the rug back and saw the hatch. Steel, brushed, no markings, just a recessed handle and a seam like a puzzle piece. It looked ancient, but the finish was new. I hesitated. My heart was pounding, but I opened it. Beneath was a staircase, narrow, made of stone, wet stone. The smell hit me instantly. Stagnant water and something deeper, older. The stairs led downward, past where the light could reach. But the sound, that's what I remember most. Running water, moving fast, like a river underground. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds. maybe more. Then I shut it, put the rug back, cleaned the rest of the room in silence. I haven't told anyone. January 17th. I've made a decision. I'm going to quit. I can't sleep. I hear footsteps at night. Inside the walls. Not rats, not plumbing. Steps. I think someone or something is moving under the floorboards. And the mirrors, they don't show me anymore. Just shapes. Like I'm slightly out of frame. Like someone's watching me from them. I've started copying these entries into another notebook. I'll mail them to Sophia. She's in Modesto now, out of the city. If something happens to me, I want her to know what I saw. Even if it doesn't make sense. Even if it sounds crazy. January 20th. I heard the hatch open last night. I wasn't in the room. I was downstairs, folding linens, but the sound, metal on metal, soft hinge, the faint splash of water echoing up into still air, then nothing. This morning the rug was back in place, but it wasn't the same rug. The embroidery was different, the stitching uneven. I think it remembers who touches it. January 21st. I mailed the journal today, wrapped it in plastic, put it in an old makeup box and dropped it at a post office 3 neighborhoods over. I didn't sign it, just wrote, in case something happens. It's out now, so I can do. I'll leave tomorrow. No goodbyes. The house can keep its secrets. I just hope it doesn't come looking for mine. The journal arrived at Sophia's house on January 24th. On January 25th, her car exploded in an alley off El Monte. No suspects, no traceable accelerants. The blast was unusual, according to first responders, more controlled than chaotic, like it was meant to burn one object and one object only. The remains of the journal were never found. But the post office security footage shows LM walking in, head down, package under arm. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. They never found her body. Some say she left the city. Others say she found another tunnel. The only thing we know for sure, she wasn't the first to see the hatch. And she won't be the last. Chapter 7. The Judge's Second Order. My job wasn't supposed to be complicated. Just confirm the chain of custody for a sealed affidavit submitted by a former bodyguard, check signatures, confirm identity, ensure the court file hadn't been tampered with. I'd done it dozens of times for grand juries and closed investigations. Clean paper trails, clock in, clock out. This one wasn't clean. The first red flag came before I even left the courthouse. When I requested the original physical submission for the affidavit, the one the judge cited during the bail hearing, the clerk hesitated. She said the digital copy had been archived properly, but the sealed envelope had been moved. Moved where? I asked. Her eyes shifted. That's what we're trying to figure out. That's when I started digging. The address attached to the affidavit was out in Riverside County. A small single-story home behind a rusted gate, security cameras on all corners, the kind of place you'd expect from someone trying to disappear. I drove out the same afternoon, expecting a signature and a handshake. Instead, I found a crime scene. The front door was open. Inside, furniture overturned, drawers pulled out, clothes scattered, photos half burned in the fireplace. It wasn't looted. It was cleaned, targeted. The walls were scorched in places, the ceiling fan blades melted slightly. I found cut wires behind a picture frame. Surveillance cables, maybe audio lines. Someone had disabled the whole system from inside. No blood, no body, just absence. On the kitchen counter, I found a fragment of a photograph. 4 men standing shoulder to shoulder in black tactical gear, no insignia. The bodyguard, who I now knew as A.J. Benton, stood in the center. His eyes had been scratched out. I called it in, filed the scene under preliminary federal review, flagged it for continuity with the ongoing court file, and returned to Los Angeles that night. Back at the courthouse, I requested access to the affidavit's digital metadata. That's when the second red flag hit. The file had been opened 3 times since submission, and not from her servers. The metadata showed 2 access points routed through proxies, one international, one domestic, and a third that pinged a dead IP address located inside the courthouse itself. The timestamps were precise. One occurred 6 hours after the bail hearing, the second 2 days later, the third 20 minutes before I logged in. Somebody was still watching. I pulled a mirror backup from the court's archival cloud, cross-checked it against the version on record. Lines were missing. Entire paragraphs redacted, not by court order, but by someone inside the system. I dug further, found an uncompiled draft stored in temporary cache, no headers, just raw text dated 7 days before the bail hearing. That's where I saw the lines that hadn't made it into the final affidavit. One in particular stopped me cold. He told us it wasn't just a tunnel system. He said it was a filter. You go down whole, you come back as someone else. The Bodyguard had written in stream of consciousness style, no formatting, just pure fear on the page. He talked about escorting guests beneath the estate, about sounds that changed depending on which corridor you walked, about names etched into the walls, carved with something sharp. One of the names was familiar. Leah Mendez. She disappeared in 2013 after attending a private event in Calabasas. Case went cold. No witnesses, no leads. Her last known location, a black SUV registered to a shell company that traced back to an estate owned, on paper, by a recording label subsidiary. I searched the public records again. The guest list for that night had no mention of her. The affidavit listed her name twice. Etched, not written, etched. I printed the affidavit draft, marked every missing line, rebuilt the file by hand. Then I went to the judge. She didn't speak while I explained. Just read. Eyes moving slowly, 1 page at a time. When she got to the section about the tunnel filter, she stopped, took off her glasses, then asked me to repeat everything twice. She didn't call the FBI directly. Instead, she instructed me to draft a secondary sealed investigative warrant, not just to the Bureau, but to a private forensic team known for investigating unacknowledged government structures, black site specialists. Her instructions were clear. This is no longer a standard evidentiary matter. This is a structural anomaly with legal consequences. Whatever this is, it was built to be forgotten, and now it's trying to forget the people who remember it. She signed the order in silence. I asked if she wanted the original Bodyguard redacted testimony submitted to open court. She shook her head. No, she said, not yet, not until we know who else is watching. Before I left, she handed me the final page of the affidavit, the one only she had seen before the court filing. It was handwritten. No signature. Some tunnels are escape routes, but not his. His were mirrors. You walk in hoping to leave something behind, and somehow it walks out without you. I don't know where A.G. Benton is. I don't know if he's even alive. But I know this. Someone tried to bury the truth. And the deeper we dig into these tunnels, the more I feel like they're not buried. They're waiting. Chapter 8. The room that doesn't forget. They didn't find the room on purpose. It wasn't on the property survey. It wasn't in the permit records, or on any floor plan, or even on the seismic scan logs. The private forensic team was finishing the final sweep when one of their ground-penetrating radars shorted out, fried completely, just beneath the northern corridor of the estate's secondary guest house. That house wasn't even part of the original warrant. It had been leased under a different LLC, registered to an offshore trust, buried 3 layers deep in unrelated business filings. But the judge's second order had included a clause: any structure connected via subterranean channel shall be considered part of the investigative domain. So they went in, and under the floorboards of a utility storage room lined with old gardening supplies, they found a seam. Not a door, not a hatch, just a subtle difference in texture. Plaster, where there should have been poured concrete. Someone had painted over it, dusted it, planted a shovel rack against the wall. But when they tore it open, the air that came out was colder than anything they'd felt in that house. It wasn't just temperature, it was old, the kind of cold that knows silence by name. The federal agent, the youngest on the team, was the first one through. He described the space as wrong. Not dangerous, not trapped, just wrong. Like it had been built with a memory it refused to share. The room was square, no windows, no obvious ventilation. The walls were covered in shelving, each shelf packed with VHS tapes, hundreds of them, some labeled, most not, and photographs. Thousands, hung on string with tiny black clips, pinned along the walls, layered over each other, all in black and white, and in every single one the eyes were scratched out. Not burned, not blurred, scratched. Nails, keys, something pointed and deliberate. In the center of the room was a single chair, wooden, worn smooth, like it had been sat in for years. The floor beneath it was scorched in a perfect circle, charred black, ringed like the bottom of a dried-up lake bed. But the chair wasn't burned. Not a mark. Just sitting there, in the middle of a floor that looked like it had caught fire and refused to spread. The federal team sealed the space immediately and sent word to the court. The court technician who logged the evidence described it later in a sworn affidavit. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew I wasn't supposed to see it. The tapes were sent to a secure facility. Of the 40 reviewed that week, 27 were unusable. Distorted sound, static images, missing footage. But 10 played clean. No timestamps, no dialogue. Just people, sitting in that same chair. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with shadows in the frame, sometimes unmoving for hours. One tape ran for 19 hours straight and never showed a single blink. The photos were scanned. Facial recognition software identified 6 of the subjects as missing persons, some from as far back as 1994. One was a girl last seen in connection with a different music producer's estate on the East Coast. Another was a boy whose foster file had been mysteriously sealed 3 months before his disappearance. The rest remain unidentified. The judge received a full report 2 days later. She didn't speak for hours. She sat in her chambers, blinds drawn, reading everything: the transcripts, the surveillance logs, the redacted portions of the Bodyguard's affidavit, and finally, the room inventory. She took out a yellow legal pad and began to write. Not an order, not a statement. A letter. Private. Unsent. I thought I was demanding an investigation into a man. But I was standing above something older. Something that built him. Something that forgot itself so well it needed others to remember it. The bodyguard, A.J. Benton, was officially declared missing the same morning. His car was found parked in front of a library 2 states away, keys in the ignition, engine off. On the passenger seat was a photo, black and white, a man in a chair. Nice. By the end of that week, strange reports started trickling in from the evidence wing of the courthouse. First, an officer said he could hear humming from the sealed tape room. Then a clerk reported that she saw someone sitting in a chair that wasn't there. Finally, a janitor was found trembling in a supply closet, whispering that the names on the wall were moving, rearranging, as if being rewritten. Fumigation was ordered not for mold, not for infestation, but as a formality. A pretext. The evidence room was emptied, the tapes moved, the photographs refiled into a cabinet that was later locked, welded, and marked for transfer to an external facility, no address given. The courtroom itself, The one where the first affidavit was read aloud was quietly decommissioned. No announcement, no hearing, no record, just closed doors, and a final line in the judge's logbook scribbled in black ink beneath the last docket number. Whatever walked out of those tunnels, it didn't need daylight, just silence, and it had that for years.